Hi, everyone. We're just going to take a couple of minutes to let everybody in, and we will get started. Okay, I'm going to kick us off so that we don't delay. Um, Hi, everybody. Good morning from me in New York. Good afternoon, good evening to the rest of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Um, so we're very, very excited about this launch today because this is something that we've been working towards for at least the last 3, 4 years. And I will let our team and our partners at Wings and all our signatories, who are, some of whom are with us on the panel today, to kind of give you all of the details and the information about this. But what I really wanted to do was just kind of give you a little bit of context, and explain why this is such an exciting launch and such an exciting day for us. Um, and tell you a little bit about this journey that AFF has gone on the climate agenda, and leading us to the launch of this commitment. Um, so, I've told this story a couple of times, so I'm going to try to maybe tell it in a little bit more concisely, um, and just to set the stage. When we first embarked on any conversation around climate, it was, I think, back in 2017, 2018, and it was in the lead up to the G20 summit that was taking place in Argentina, um, and the F20 group, which is one of the various groups that reports into the G20, um, had been looking to, find any kind of climate funding or climate focused funding that was taking place across the Arab region. And so they got in touch with the Arab Foundations Forum as an obvious place to sort of check in and see if there were any partners that they could talk to. And we looked among our network and really couldn't find um, any of our members or anybody who was, part of our network who had been focusing on climate as part of a core pillar in their, funding agenda. And so I remember I got back to the F20 group and I was like, I'm really sorry, but we don't have anyone that we can point you to. And they said, would you be interested in learning a little bit about this so that maybe you can share those learnings with your network? And so I kind of embarked on this learning journey with the F20. I accompanied them to Buenos Aires in Argentina, um, and just kind of, really served as an observer more than anything to learn and understand a little bit more about how foundations were making climate as part of their strategic agenda. And it was, for me, a little bit overwhelming because I know nothing about climate or environment or nature conservation or any of that. That's not my wheelhouse. It's not my area of expertise. And really knew even less about funding for climate. So it was a little bit overwhelming, and I think, at first my sense of overwhelm was relayed back to the network because as I started to engage our network in this conversation, I think that at first that engagement was a little bit awkward, because I wasn't really sure I had the language to explain what it was that we were looking for. And at the time, I mean, now we're looking at almost 9 years ago. Um, we were just in the region really just dealing with too many other priorities. And so I think at first there just was a disconnect in terms of what I was bringing to the table as an agenda to be discussed and what people were willing to receive and kind of willing to be engaged in. And somehow, I mean, through the mentorship of a lot of different climate experts, including folks from the F20 and then our partners at Wings, we sort of slowly built up to a better understanding of what the climate agenda was, and then also a better way to communicate it to our network in terms of not bringing it as something that was new that people had to add to their agenda, but really more about how they could incorporate climate into pre-existing programming, and then also how they were already dealing with things that had to do with climate that just maybe wasn't as explicit or as overtly understood. And I feel like that was really a turning point, and that probably happened sometime around 2021. Um, and then by 2023, at our general meeting, which took place in Egypt, in Cairo in September, um, we launched our climate working group, which kind of brought together some of the interested foundations and donors and some of our network members. And we sort of launched this working group with the intention of going on this kind of learning journey together and trying to understand what we could do around climate. And we, did that with our partnership with Wings. Um, so that was September 2023, which, for in my view is really kind of like 1 month before the entire world changed. And certainly our kind of sector, because 1 month later, actually less than 1 month later, because I think our event ended on the 11th of September or something like that. So just under a month later, October 7th happened. Genocide in Gaza was kind of initiated. And then we saw, these two plus years of complete chaos, and also an upending of the sector itself. And so again, a shift in priorities. But somehow, and I'm intrigued by this um, development, but somehow our climate group just kept going. And despite, all these other um, kind of chaotic incidents that were happening throughout the sector, including the withdrawal of USAID funding and then kind of copycat withdrawals across the sector for funding for development and for humanitarian aid, et cetera, et cetera. This climate group just kept going and met, I think it was once a month, every month, and just really, put their head down and kind of moved forward. And this led to, number one, more representation at COP. So I remember COP 28, we had, I think, 8 of our network members attending. By the time Baku came around, we kind of had a soft launch of the commitment at COP 29. So, I mean, it just kind of built up progressively, and very interesting to, as a retrospective, to look back at, 2017, 2018, when we were first approached, and we were just like, we honestly have no idea how to kind of deal with this. And we look at where we are today. We joined the Philanthropy for Climate initiative with Wings, and then somehow found ourselves as the first regional commitment to be signed and launched, which I just think is such an incredible milestone. But then also it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, given what we know about how um, this climate issue affects our region, even though the Arab region doesn't contribute as much to the deterioration of climate, we do end up kind of facing a lot of the more dire consequences in our region. And so I think what you'll hear from our panelists and our speakers today is a little bit more about A, what that really looks like in practical terms, and then B, what does the mitigation look like in practical terms. So I'm not going to take up too much more time. I just really wanted to give kind of this context, and then give you a very quick overview of what the rest of today is going to look like, what the rest of the next hour and a half together will look like. So I'm going to first of all just very briefly, quickly list out who our speakers are and who our esteemed panelists are. So on the speaker side, you have myself, and then Erica Miller from Wings. You have Walid Nagy, who's the Deputy Director of AFF, Nadine Ablouheb, who's also going to be speaking to us about kind of the logic framework that we've used, and who's been supporting us across our climate content and programming over the last year. And then we have from our panelist side, Mais Abu Hagab from Sawiras Foundation. We have Maram Zaid from the King Hussein Foundation, Miriam Awadallah from Mercy Corps, and Mohammed Kamal from Greenish, I believe, right? Is that right? Right? So I will hand it over to Erica, and then Erica will kind of moderate the rest of the session. And then at one point towards the end, we have, I think, about 25 minutes for Q&A from the attendees. So please make sure to put your questions in the Q&A panel. I will be monitoring both the Q&A and the chat just in case, but preferably on the Q&A so we can keep track. And I'll moderate the questions and answers, and then we'll close out. So thank you so much. And Erica, over to you.
Naila, thank you so much, and good afternoon. It's morning for me, but good afternoon to, I think, most of you. It's a pleasure to be here to celebrate another milestone coming out of the climate work from the Arab region that's being spearheaded by AFF, but supported by a lot of the folks that are going to that you'll hear from today. I think today, when we're talking about the launch of the implementation guide for the Arab Philanthropy Commitment on Climate Change, it's an important milestone not only for AFF and the working group behind this guide, but also for the global philanthropy for climate movement as a whole. As some of you may or may not know, the Arab commitment sits within a growing global ecosystem of national and regional philanthropic commitments on climate change, which are all aligned around a shared purpose, really around encouraging foundations, regardless of size, geography, or mission focus, to embed a climate lens from things like their governance, from the operations, from funding, excuse me, from programs to the influence and advocacy, really across the broad spectrum of what philanthropic organizations and foundations do. And today, this movement brings together more than 960 foundations across 20 countries, of which the Arab Commitment is one of 12 standing commitments across the world. And what's powerful about this movement is not only the scale, but it's really the diversity. All types of foundations, from family foundations, corporate foundations, intermediaries, operating foundations, and others that are really engaging with climate from very different starting points, but with a shared framework and through some sort of a shared language. And across vastly different geographic contexts. And right now, as a part of this work, we're currently preparing the first Philanthropy for Climate Global Movement Progress Report, which is trying to look at what has the movement achieved since its inception, which really started back in 2019. And one of the clearest trends that we see across the board is that foundations don't stall on climate because they lack ambition. They stall or they have challenges to act on climate because they lack practical pathways for action. And so this is precisely why the launch of the implementation guide, of this Arab implementation guide, is so important. The guide offers something very intentional. It's not a checklist nor a prescription, but instead it provides clear entry points for actions, a shared logic framework, and a progression pathway that organizations can return to time and time again. And I think that's what you're going to see part of this guide, is that it's not something that you can use once, throw away, and move forward. It's something that is meant to be alive, to be accessible at different parts of your journey, and to have entry points for all types of organizations that are looking to act on climate. And so in doing this, the guide is reinforcing that the implementation of a commitment on climate is not linear, but that review, learning, and adaptation, when we build them into the process through guides like this, can really help foundations accelerate on their climate journey over time. And Naila, you pointed to the uniqueness of the Arab commitment, which is kind of the broad context that the Arab regional commitment works across and kind of cuts through. And I think this is something that makes the Arab commitment so unique, that it brings together foundations operating across these vastly different national contexts, regulatory environments, cultures, languages, but grounding the work in shared regional values that come through in the implementation guide, including kind of traditions of stewardship, solidarity, faith-based giving, and that the climate challenges are also affecting the region in different ways to differing degrees, but that there are some common frameworks that can be applied towards tackling them and opportunities for collaboration across the region on climate. And so this guide is a tool that was designed to be leveraged by all, regardless of that context. And in offering kind of multiple pathways for action, and Waleed will tell us more about the structure in a little bit, this guide is helping meet organizations where they're at while still encouraging collective ambition. And so it marks not only the culmination of an enormous collaborative effort, but it also marks the beginning of a new phase of work for the Arab commitment, and how this tool can support organizations in turning their commitments into credible, visible, and shareable impact. And another piece of data that I want to bring before I pass it over that we're seeing through the global progress data that we're looking at is that 88% of the 450 foundations respondents of data that we have, 88% have said that the climate commitment has added value to their organization, influencing their awareness, their decision-making, and their action. And so I hope this big percentage of folks telling us the commitment and the resources and value for that, I hope this serves as a strong motivator for foundations across the Arab region to join the Arab commitment under the leadership of AFF, and to actively leverage the tools like this implementation guide so that together we can begin to address the existing and the looming impacts of climate change that are really intersecting and affecting all of the development agendas. And I think this is one of the reasons why this group has pushed through on talking about climate for the past 2, almost 3 years, is because of how deeply interconnected climate change and its impacts are with so many of the current challenges that are being seen, that are being felt, and that we need to approach in the region, including some of the the genocide in Gaza, and how climate is coming in there and affecting livelihoods day to day. So it really is permeating all of the work that we're doing, and I want to commend the group here and all of the others who have stuck with us on this journey, spearheaded by AFF, by Waleed, by Naila, by Nadine, and the rest of the team. And so we're excited to, throughout the rest of the time, share that work. So thank you. And I think, Waleed, back over to you and to Nadine to show us the guide and the framework that I just spoke about.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Naila. I'll let Nadine take us through the process of how we reach the point where we are today, and then I'll take it from there.
Nadine, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
It kind of seems to me like her image is a bit shaky, so I think maybe her connection isn't great.
Okay, Waleed, do you want to go ahead and step in?
You're on mute, Waleed.
Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon for us here in the Arab region. Um, Let me just put this on full screen. I'm sorry. I'm not great with technology. Yeah. Honestly, it really marks an amazing milestone of where we have started few years ago, as Naila was saying, and it really gives me an amazing and great pleasure to be here with you today, setting this major milestone within our climate journey over the last few years by launching the Arab Philanthropy Commitment on Climate Change Implementation Guide. This has been a major achievement for the Arab Foundations Forum and the members of the Climate Working Group, of course. And it is really an evidence of the hard work, commitment, and collaboration between our members over the last couple of years to bring this commitment to life. And I'm personally proud to be part of this group coordinating their different activities and inputs. Oh, it's from Just to set the scene, I would like to start by a little introduction about the Arab Philanthropy Commitment on Climate Change, which I will refer to as APCCC, which is a call to action for philanthropic organizations across the Arab regions, across the Arab world in total, to address the urgent challenges of climate change, inequality, and development. The APCCC was developed by a committed group of AFF members under the larger international climate commitment developed by WINGS and Philea, and was launched in COP29 in November 2024. The signatories of the APCCC commit to take action under 7 different pillars, reflecting regional priorities, traditions, and local contexts, of course. Together, these efforts form part of the global philanthropy for climate movement, as Erica was saying, connecting Arab philanthropy to more than 900 foundations worldwide working toward climate justice and, most importantly, systematic change. To date, we have 5 signatories to the commitment in the Arab region, and we want to see the number growing following the launch of the implementation guide today, as this gives us practical steps on how to implement the commitment itself. I'll start with a call to action, and I will end with it once again. We invite all foundations and all philanthropic actors, regardless of their size, mission, geographic location, to act collectively in advancing a just, sustainable, and resilient future for all communities in the Arab region. As I just mentioned, the climate commitment is based on 7 different pillars: education and empowerment, commitment of internal resources, integration of programs, endowments and assets and how we can use them, operations internally, advocacy and policy change, and finally, transparency and accountability, reporting on what we have done in order to ensure that others and other peers are learning from our experiences, and also to measure impact. You can find the exact text under each pillar under the AFF website, the climate commitment segment, and it's also included in the implementation guide itself. Following the launch of the APCCC in 2024, we started 2025, of course. The working group members continued their mission and collectively developed the implementation guide for the commitment. The implementation guide, what does it do? It offers a practical roadmap to help signatories translate their commitments into meaningful action. It outlines the regional rationale behind the APCCC and proposes suggested actions under each pillar, organized across 3 levels of progress: getting started, building momentum, and showing leadership. Each pillar further is structured around 4 strategic focus areas: institutional development, system thinking, scaling up resources, and building community. Nadine will take us through those 4 stages, and they are called the logic model, or the 4 Cs. They provide a clear and adaptable framework for organizational growth, learning, and impact. This logic model, which I will be showing you, and I will show you how it looks like exactly, and why then it defines why this is called a guide, just a guide to implement the commitment itself. Just want to add that philanthropic organizations in the Arab region are diverse in mandate, governance, capacity. Some may begin by aligning internal operations or strategies, while others may already be leading on advocacy, innovation, or system change. Regardless of the starting point, the APCCC encourages all signatories to act intentionally, share learning openly, and raise ambition for a sustainable, equitable, and climate resilient Arab region. Trying to move to the next. In this slide, I would like to share with you how we can visualize the climate journey from start to end. I wouldn't really call it the end, but let's call it this way for now. The moment an organization makes the decision to sign the commitment, to the actual implementation, and then measuring the results and reporting them. This is, of course, a continuous cycle, as it does not really end, as I was saying. It is a journey, a continuous cycle of revisions of strategy to do things better and at a larger scale, and disseminate learnings amongst peers so they can learn from you and try to do things better too. It does not matter where you start, whether big or small, or whether you have enough data. It is important that you start somewhere and improve it with time. You can select the pillar that is most suitable and easiest to start with in terms of implementation. And of course, it has to be aligned with the strategies of the organization. And then learn from others on how they do the rest and apply the shared knowledge in a way that is most suitable to your practices. And now I will just show you an illustration of how the implementation guide is structured, so it gives you an idea of the content. I'll just take pillar 1 on education and empowerment as an example. Under each pillar in the guideline, in the guidebook, there is a text of the pillar itself and what it includes, followed by the regional context. Why is it important? And then why it is important to be implemented and how it links to the climate actions that the organizations take. So it's very detailed and gives you lots of ideas. And now we move to the guide itself, the suggested steps that organizations can take and what they can do. Again, these actions that are suggested here are not prescriptive by any means. They are a menu of adaptable approaches designed to support organizations in different stages of their climate journey. I think it's really worth mentioning that the beauty about those suggested actions is that they are the compilations of ideas and practices that the working group themselves have come up with. And they come based on actual experiences and practices that are implemented by the organizations that work in different sectors and different geographical areas and countries. So they are not theoretical, but rather doable action items. As you see, the suggested action items are divided into the 4 categories: internal, the capacity and the credibility, and externally, the capability and the connection, the 4 Cs model. And they are also divided into the 3 levels of implementation: getting started, building momentum, and showing leadership. The rest of the pillars are also designed in the same way exactly. I think now it's time to launch the implementation guide itself, which is available on our website as of this afternoon. I'll just take a second to show you how it looks like. And the link to the implementation guide will be available on the chat. My colleague Nihal Moqbil will put it in there. So this is really how the implementation guide looks like. It's a very deep and thought about guide introducing the climate commitment, introducing the 7 pillars, the climate journey, and looking into the details, explaining the 4 C's, the logic model, and looking at each pillar and why is it important to be implemented, how it relates to the Arab context, and of course, giving all the steps, all the suggested non-prescriptive action items that organizations can do. And it goes into pillar 2, pillar 3 on integration in programmatic areas, looking at our endowments and assets as funders and organizations, looking into operations internally, what organizations can do in order to reduce the effects of climate change, policy, advocacy and policy change. Why is it important for the region? What organizations can do, of course. And finally, transparency and accountability, and what organizations can do in terms of reporting and learning from peers. And now I really want to invite all philanthropic organizations who are present with us in the room today or outside of the room to join us in this vital commitment to climate action and to follow the league of other organizations in the region and globally. As Erica was saying, there are 960 foundations, including a few from the Arab region, and we would like to see that number grow in the Arab region, of course, and globally in order to really have an effect on climate change globally and in the region. Thank you very much for being with us here today and being part of this milestone by launching the full Arab Philanthropy Commitment on climate change, including the implementation guide. And before I disappear, I just want to tell you, I want to have special thanks to all the members of the Climate Working Group who committed their time, their experiences, their learning with us throughout our journey over the last couple of years. And of course, special thanks for Wings and all the support and guidance that they have provided us over the last couple of years. Thank you all.
Oh, Erica, over to you, so we can get hear from our panelists.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Waleed, and congratulations. It's very fun to see, well, all of the speakers and the people here present smiling as you officially launch the guide and seeing it live online. As we've said multiple times before, this group has been working tirelessly to bring it together, and it really is the product of each of these organizations' lived experience, what they see on the ground, the realities that they exist within, the things that they've tried and tested, but also examples of actions that they haven't yet tried or tested, but they think that the sector is ready to do. And so that's why we have the guide is a big compilation of suggested actions through different levels of where you are at your journey, different internal impacts that it can have, and that we see through the logic framework of the 4 C's. And so we really hope that you take the chance to look through it, because there's a lot of richness in there and a lot of different entry points, no matter where you are at. It really, there's no excuse to get engaged with the work that this group has done to make a document so accessible and really applicable to all organizations. And so without further ado, we want to get into the panel. As Naila mentioned, we have a great group of speakers here today who have all been part of the working group, not only for the implementation guide, but also for the commitment, the Arab commitment itself. So working and supporting AFF over the past 2 years or more. And they are all early signatories to the commitment, bringing real practical experience of how they've been implementing its pillars. And so delighted today to be joined by Mais of the Sawadis Foundation, Muhammad of Greenish, Madame of the King Hussein Foundation, and Medium from Mercy Corps. And today in our conversation, we hope to understand from each of you and from your organizational perspective, not only what has the commitment said, but also how has it helped you act, and how the new implementation guide will enable you to go further in your commitment. And so kicking us right off into the discussion with a first question around how do you see the implementation guide now supporting you in your journey to implement the pillars that you are finding the most challenging? Since you started acting on your commitment, there's different pillars that you've prioritized, that you've worked on, and some that have been more difficult to tackle. And so how do you really see the implementation guide now being able to support your work? And maybe we'll kick off with Maram to start from King Hussein.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with you to celebrate the launch of the guide and also to share our journey in our climate commitments and also to share our experience using the guide itself. So the King Hussein Foundation has been addressing the different socioeconomic challenges facing the communities in Jordan for around 40 years through a multi-sectorial approach, leveraging the experience and expertise of our 7 institutes. And we work across different sectors, including education, health, livelihoods, culture, and arts. And we also do research and we do community empowerment. And through our work and through our projects, we have clearly seen that climate change is really affecting our communities, and it is also exacerbating the socioeconomic challenges facing our communities. So our commitment to the Arab philanthropy is because we believe, and a core goal of our strategy to increase our level of climate actions to support our communities to become more resilient. And we believe that our responsibility goes beyond just project implementation, but we also need to strengthen our institutional systems, capacities, and operations, so we as organization or active organization in the development sector become more sustainable and resilient. With regard to the guide, to be honest, it has been very helpful for us, but because, as you said, it is action-oriented. It includes or offers several suggested actions under the different pillars and under different stages. So it really helped us in streamlining our approach and helped us in translating our commitments into real actions or implementable actions. And it also helped us to decide on where to start and how to prioritize our actions under different pillars and how to move forward with our commitments. So with regard to our progress, to be honest, we started with getting started, and we began with the education, commitment of resources, and integration to lay the foundation to be able to move forward. So the King Hussein Foundation has established this environmental sustainability and climate resilience unit where I'm the head of this unit. So the purpose of this unit is to coordinate all climate-related efforts, activities, and projects across the 7 institutes, and to support the institutes in integrating climate and environmental considerations into their projects and program designs and implementations. And we have also conducted several climate awareness sessions to have common language and a shared understanding of climate-related terminologies and to discuss and explain further the impacts of climate change on different sectors. For example, the health sector, how climate change affects the health sector. We also developed tools like, for example, we developed a guide and checklist for environmental considerations to be used by different staff at different levels in the project design and project implementation. And we also developed climate-related KPIs, and we integrated those KPIs into our monitoring and evaluation framework. So every project is reviewed through a climate lens. And me, as the head of the environmental sustainability unit, I support institutes in moving forward with their actions to achieve their KPIs. And we also, with regard to operations, we started by conducting a greenhouse gas audit using the UNFCCC calculator to establish a baseline and to develop a roadmap for reductions. But of course, we will not compromise our outreach and impact and outreach to communities. But this audit helped us in identifying the targets and where we can reduce our footprint internally. Yeah. And I believe if we can move forward with other pillars with time. It will take time. It will take time. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I answered the challenges.
You can maybe shed a little bit of light if you
Sorry.
want to share. If you want to share where you were seeing a bit of the challenges, please go ahead.
Yeah. For us, as I mentioned previously, that we aim to increase our contribution to climate actions and to integrate environmental sustainability into our operations. But one of the major challenges is securing financial resources to increase our climate actions and also to widen our outreach and impact. With regard to the implementation of pillars themselves, one of the challenges that we faced during the first stages is the lack of common understanding of climate terminology's impact, because not all staff have the technical, climate-related technical background. So we did awareness sessions to increase their awareness on climate and impact. And during conducting this greenhouse gas audit, we worked with the finance team, but there were some data gaps. But for next time, we prepared the sheet that includes all information that need to be collected to be able to do the greenhouse gas audit every year. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam. It's great to hear a bit of the journey that you've been on with the King Hussein Foundation, and really good to hear that you see the value in leveraging the implementation guide to help streamline your approach. And I think that's what it's meant to do. It's not necessarily, the guide is not meant to instill your ambition. Hopefully you can arrive to the commitment with some ambition, but the guide is meant to help streamline the actions that you want to take. And it's great to hear how many tools that you've developed. And I think one of the greatest assets of a group like this and a commitment that brings in multiple actors is being able to share those tools, to share those experiences. And so we have a lot to learn from you, Madam, and that I hope you'll be able to share throughout the commitment as it continues to evolve and develop. Maybe we'll go next to Miriam from Mercy Corps to tell us a little bit about how you envision the implementation guide being leveraged throughout the work that you do, but also where some of the challenges that you've experienced to date as signatories to the commitment.
Thank you, Erica, and just congratulations to AFF on the launch of the implementation guide. This has been my first time to see it published, and it looks beautiful. And we were just so honored to be a part of this journey with you. But at Mercy Corps, our climate journey has actually predated this particular body of work. But the commitment and this implementation guide have been really valuable in helping us step back and view our work through a clearer regional and institutional lens. And those for those audience members that don't know as well, Mercy Corps is a global NGO that works across humanitarian response to longer-term development. And we have a very strong footprint in the Middle East. And importantly, the communities that we support are some of the most vulnerable in the world, and like has been reflected across this conversation, are impacted the most by climate change and have contributed to it the least. So with this these realities in mind, and especially around how climate change is impacting those communities. Mercy Corps has actually put in place the Chief Climate Officer, David Nicholson, who's led this effort globally, ensuring that climate is integrated across operational and programmatic channels. So we started with the pillars that were closest to our operational reality, especially integration, organizational capacity, and policy engagement. And in the context where we work, climate change is not a standalone issue. It is a multiplier of vulnerability. It shapes food systems, water access, economic opportunity, displacement, and humanitarian response, which is why we've long treated climate as a cross-cutting driver of both risk and resilience. So, for example, across our food systems and water programs, we routinely integrate climate risk analysis into our program design. And whether that's supporting climate smart agriculture for smallholder farmers, strengthening water governance in drought affected areas, or embedding climate considerations into early recovery and humanitarian response. So climate is not treated as an add-on. It shapes how interventions are designed from the start. So in practice, climate integration for us means that a food security program that doesn't assess climate risk is no longer considered a complete program. Where we found things more challenging, and where I'm sure many organizations can likely relate, is around greening operations at scale and in consistently measuring and communicating progress across very different country contexts. So, for instance, improving procurement practices or reducing travel emissions looks very different in a stable office setting versus in a humanitarian response context where things like speed, access, and duty of care are critical. So greening operations looks very different for us in a place like Sudan than it would in the US. And the guide gives space for that reality, which I think is really critical. Operating within a humanitarian context is often extremely dynamic and unpredictable, especially when you're thinking about some of the realities of short-term project grants. So as a large decentralized organization, change does not happen uniformly. It's often incremental, uneven, and difficult to capture through simple metrics. But I think what the implementation guide does particularly well is acknowledge this reality, and the tiered structure from getting started to building momentum to showing leadership allows institutions to prioritize and sequence their efforts without feeling overwhelmed or performative, which I know, Naila, you were talking about at the beginning of your intro. And then for us, it reinforces that climate action is a journey. It's not a checklist, like you said, Erica, and that learning and adaptation are critical components of effective implementation.
Thank you, Miriam. I think it's great to hear that this journey started for you long before the creation of Philanthropy for Climate as a whole movement, but that there were still entry points for you, and you saw how it was applicable to your everyday work and could actually now serve as a tool to further reinforce the work that you're doing. And I think that's exactly the point for a lot of the folks who come into this movement who are climate funders, or are already working so deeply connected to the climate space. And really hearing that a climate lens underpins all of the work that you do, and that the guide gives space for different realities. I think that's another piece that we really tried to make sure came clear through the guide, was that it actually embraced contextual differences, different realities, so that all could come into the journey and all could be included, regardless of those differences. So thanks for highlighting that. And we'll hear a little bit more about your internal journey in the next segment of the questions. I would like to turn it now to Mohammed from Greenish to share again insights around how you picture and are thinking about leveraging the implementation guide in your climate work now, and what some of the challenges that have surfaced for you, how those might be addressed with the guide now being published. So over to you, Mohammed. Mohammed, if you're not there, we will give you a moment to come back or join us again. And in the meantime, last but not least, or now not last, because we'll go to Mohammed after, but Mays, please, from the Saweetis Foundation, please share with us your reflections on the implementation guide and some of the challenges that you've been facing at Saweetis that you hope will be able to be supported by the new guide.
Yeah, thank you, Erica, Walid, Naila, and everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. It's been indeed a very long journey, but definitely rewarding, so much rewarding for everyone. Many insights that I'd like to share. I know a lot of many of the points were already covered by other panelists and even by Naila and Walid, but maybe just, to put it into some part of the story of how our journey has been at the Saweetis Foundation, because we had also, historically had an interest around climate change and, environment protection. Historically, we were two separate foundations, one on environment protection, one on social development, that were merged into one. And at that point, it was decided, climate change and environment protection is going to become, a part of our embedded within our programming and a cross-cutting strategy, which was then reinforced for us as a foundation as we revamped and launched an ambitious strategy in 2023, focusing on reducing multidimensional poverty in Egypt and empowering agents of change and using evidence-based programming and, advancing our work and influencing policymaking inside of Egypt. Since the date we had launched the strategy, we had already identified, climate change, gender equity, people with disability as part of our cross-cutting strategies. But for the various challenges that we've been faced within the region, we've been we've been just about coming out of COVID, working a lot on, implementing a lot of evidence-based programming, funding a lot of, impact evaluations. We didn't know where to start, it's nice to say like you have a cross-cutting strategy, but then having the time and the framework to think within and to decide like, okay, this is exactly how I'm going to be working on, because constantly we have other priorities that we're dragged into reporting on, working on specifically in a country like Egypt. So as the APCC was launched, we felt, what, that's it. Let's become signatory to it, and it will be a tool to hold ourselves accountable as well to progress towards, finally developing our cross-cutting strategy and understanding where to work. And we had our team at the foundation who joined most of the working groups in advancing the guide, and the guide has provided the framework for us. It has organized our thoughts, okay, where to start, what to be working on. From a leadership, how important it is to include, leadership from the onset, having the buy-in of our board, of our executive director as well, forming a committee from the foundation to ensure the buy-in of every single member of the different sectors at the foundation. We have an education and scholarship sector, we have an economic empowerment sector, we have a social empowerment sector, a total of 9 programs. We have a large team. We knew, and that the guide also, gave us this guideline that if you're going to be doing this, it is important to have those who are going to be implementing, working, reporting on the process as well. So we formed a climate change cross-cutting committee that involved participation from every single, department at the foundation or sector at the foundation. We had already, because, the process is not linear, and that's the beauty of this guide, and I believe the guide also highlights this. It's rarely a linear process for different organizations. So as we were advancing the development of the cross-cutting strategies, we were already funding projects that included interventions around climate resilience and climate and, agriculture smart solutions, and financing and impact evaluation around it. And, just also observing those implementation, looking into the theory of changes of the different projects and how they can feed back into the loop of designing our different frameworks. We had, as Maram also said, technical experience and in-house experience at the foundation was one of the challenges as well, as we do not have a standalone, program around that. We needed to invest a lot in ensuring that everyone has the same basis and foundation of knowledge to start with. So in 2025, we invested a lot of resources and time to elevate the capacity of the foundation at large, but also for the specific climate change committee to understand what it means, how we could be reporting on it, how we could be integrating and working on it. Definitely the part on operations, as we were looking at, it was quite challenging for the foundation as well, just understanding, where to start, what it means, developing the different tools. We had to resort to external consultants at the foundation to help us develop those tools. We are yet, we had our eyes forward, and the guide also helped us because eventually we always needed to be reminded that we're part of a regional commitment, and this regional commitment is part of a global commitment. And eventually we will need to be reporting on our progress as a foundation as part of the signatories. So we had our eye on what we needed to be reporting on and just understanding, okay, how to get there. And that's also the beauty of the guide. It also tells you, it's just very generic, but also tells you, okay, this is how you get there. This is what you can be working on, and just having an eye, okay, I will be reporting on this. So I need to ensure that, my strategy involves those different pillars. It is already part of the work, and that's actually part of the journey that we discovered. We were already doing a lot, and Naila said, similar to Naila's journey. For us, we were already doing a lot on the topic that we didn't realize. And it was also, very enlightening to see, okay, that we're not actually starting from scratch. There is a lot that we're working on. We just need the right framework to understand how to frame it, how to reshape our indicators, like Maram was saying, and embed it differently within our results framework and our monitoring frameworks, and how we can be reporting on the actually effort that we're working on, and how we can further advance specifically when it comes to our procurement policies, processes, and our internal operations, but also operations of those NGOs that we're funding as well, because eventually this is part of, the reporting that we're working on to also help us develop a full, component on climate change, as we have an NGO capacity building program that we're financing at the foundation as well. It was important to also make sure that we have a whole module on climate change for the NGOs that we're going to be working with, and we work towards developing this, guideline. We were cross-checking all the time with the APCCC guideline and framework, and we work towards accrediting this guideline and making sure that that the different NGOs that we're working with are also going to be partaking in this capacity building efforts, because we realized, okay, it's not just our work, it's also the work of our sub-grantees that we also need to be reporting on, not just from the projects on the ground project, but also from the operations side. So it has been quite of a journey. There is definitely a lot we still need to build on and learn from, and we're going to continue this journey in 2026, and we're hoping to release an initial report by end of 2026. That's our goal for this year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mais. I think one of the things you called out was the vulnerability around not knowing where to start. And I think that's a real vulnerability that's felt from a lot of different organizations, especially in the context of so many competing priorities, right? And climate change at face value is very overwhelming in terms of everything that it affects, that it impacts, what we need to prioritize within that. But I think the ability, like you expressing that you were able to leverage not only the commitment, but also now the guide, ultimately to also help make the case internally and bring leadership along as well. I hope that will be of service to other organizations who are in this kind of vulnerable moment of not knowing where to start, leveraging the commitment, the guide as a way to organize those thoughts, pick an entry point, make the case internally for leadership as well, and start the journey. So thank you for sharing that with us. Mohammed, over to you to tell us a little bit about the implementation guide and how you're thinking about it at Greenish and how you'll leverage it.
Thank you very much, Erica. And it's really a pleasure to be with everyone here. And thank you once again for the invitation and having me. My name is Mohammed Kamal. I'm the Executive Director of Greenish Foundation. we, as an organization, are probably the least foundation in the foundations present today. We operate differently. The definition of a foundation, I guess, or the term muassasa in Egypt is a little bit different to the general one generally used. We are in an interesting positionality, I would say. We already worked on a variety of aspects relating to climate and environmental development. And specifically, we focus more on education. So we work on education, we work on awareness and advocacy as the main three areas of work as an organization. So given that we had already worked on those areas, when we started to support and work more on the implementation, first of all, obviously on the commitments, and then more on supporting the work for the guide, we had some of our own positionalities and knowledge and experiences as well, especially from the different stakeholders that we had worked with and the different organizations that we had worked with as well. What is key and different for us when I look at, so we look at the commitments, the main one we are as an organization concerned with is focused on education and empowerment. For us, the key interest we have is we look at the current funding landscape even before the past 2 years, and we knew that it was not sustainable, and we knew that there needed to be a change. Our personal experience as a young foundation, mainly that is youth-led, is we've struggled with previous, let's say, financing opportunities because they're directed to, let's say, traditional development, while the needs of environment and climate work could sometimes be different. And also the needs of some youth organizations might also be different. So from that experience, we came with an interest in trying to, let's say, mobilize different resources. That is the genuine interest we came with. And our sort of priority is education. Education is at several levels. So if we look at our interest in sort of adopting and implementing this commitment, we look at education first and foremost on organizations. So when we look at organizations, we look at key partners that exist within the sector we work in already, and also regional partners as well. The education part is not necessarily only focused on educating them regarding what it means to do climate philanthropy or philanthropy overall, but also on understanding the landscape of opportunities that exist. There are two sides of the coin of who needs the financing and the coin of who has the financing. And over the past, let's say, 2 years, if I can reflect personally, what we have found is that on both sides, there are actors that are just not aware of where to go and what to explore. And probably the ones less aware are the ones on the financing side in the region. And this is the area we have been trying to slowly engage with. To give more clarity, we're looking more at the traditional development donors in the region, the traditional, let's say, charitable associations in the region. The work we have done is to what we want to do is negligible yet. It's more of we've started at identification level. We've identified who should start to engage with such a commitment. And then obviously there is education on the subject itself. There is education on climate issues and education on what actually needs that type of development work. And I believe in that front, we've already been doing quite a lot of work as an organization. We work with different target stakeholders. We work with young people on educating them on climate and environmental issues locally, whether at university level or at school level. We also work with partners on, let's say, on the area between capacity building, so building skills and actual education for change. So if I'm sort of, not to take up too much time, but to pin out the specific point that we believe in, the reason education and empowerment are tied together is once they are well educated on the subject, once they are conscious of where they can possibly fit, then they are empowered to see, so these commitments, we can start to be part of them slowly. And here specifically on the development organizations, traditional ones in the region, there's just a lot of work that needs to be done. And obviously, 1 or 2 organizations would not be enough. The commitment helps a lot in mobilizing that, but more actors are needed and more convincing power is needed as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. I think I want to echo just the importance of education and really how the commitment itself has been structured for education to be the entry-level pillar, for it to be the kind of first thing that foundations are considering and different philanthropic organizations are considering when they start to look at climate. I think we've heard from Mays, from Maram, but also from in Miriam's case, the importance of how that education has set the foundation and organization up for success at the beginning, that educating early allows for longer term impact, longer term strategic intervention, longer term integration of climate throughout programs, throughout strategies. So I think it's great to see that the focus for you has been on that. And then I think what I'm hearing is that you agree, and as being part of kind of creating the implementation guide, that it does a good job at kind of providing a framework for that education across the different pillars at different levels and being able to bring everyone in. I'm just looking at time, and as we all need to be flexible and in moments like this, and I do feel that each of you have brought a lot of richness in what you've said. We don't have that much time to go into the next round of questions. So what I first wanted to do was for us to omit that round of question, but I want to give each of the speakers the chance to leave anything with the audience that you were going to bring in your second question that you think is of utmost importance before we move on to one final thought that I want to bring Nadine back into the conversation. But before we do that, Mais, Maram, Miriam, Mohammed, was there anything that you were going to bring in the next question that you really want to make sure you leave with the audience before we close the panel session? Maram, go ahead.
If I may add that we should not only focus on climate projects only, we should also consider integrating environmental principles and considerations into the projects, different projects, even if they are not climate focused. For example, if we do gender-based violence, for example, we need to highlight in the rationale problem statement the impacts of climate change. And when we, for example, do some interventions, infrastructural work and any other not climate related, we should also consider the environmental principles in the design and implementation of the project. This is so important. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam.
Maybe one final remark from my end, because I think part of the journey also of the foundation has been, and I mentioned this quickly, that we work, on evidence-based programming, and this is our entry point for advocating for the different change. So as part of this journey, the foundation had supported the establishment of a so-called Egypt Impact Lab in collaboration with J. Palmina, and was co-funding also from Community Jamil. And this was really important because it wasn't just the local communities that we wanted to affect, it was also the decision-making and the national decision-making that we also wanted to influence. And so similarly, because we had this commitment on climate change, we also co-funded the establishment of a newly established hub under the Egypt Impact Lab, which is the Egypt Impact Lab, for everyone who doesn't know it, is housed within the Ministry of Planning because it's important. So it is a national led hub that works around policymaking, capacity building of the different, public servants, ensuring that everyone is able to use evidence-based into an informed decision-making processes. So we also supported the launch of, we call it the Air and Water Lab, but it's actually the hub for advanced policies and innovation in environment development. So the hub's sole focus is also on generating evidence and influencing policymaking at national level. So this is also part of the journey, and it's also important, and I encourage others maybe to, and we can leave more information about that, because it's important to also ask different foundations to work, on bottom-up approaches, but also, encourage the top-down interventions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mais. Miriam, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, just two things from my end as takeaways. I would say for organizations that are earlier in their journey, our biggest takeaway as Mercy Corps is just don't wait for perfect data or perfect systems. Start with what you can measure, align it to your decision making, and then just build from there. And I think that this implementation guide is particularly helpful because of that. It recognizes that organizations will move at different speeds. And I think leadership in the climate space is as much about transparency and learning as it is about ambition. And we focus so much on systems and measurement at Mercy Corps because the stakes are human. Like I said earlier, the people who are most affected by climate change are those with the fewest resources and the least voice in global decision making. So institutional change it's not abstract. It's what allows us to deliver assistance and build resilience in ways that are more just, effective, and accountable to these communities.
Thank you, Miriam, for bringing that. I think it is one of the elements that is really intrinsic to the commitment, but we often focus so much on the external pieces and changing our strategy and our programs, which is extremely important. But being able to walk the talk is what gives integrity to our work. Mohammed, is there anything that you wanted to add? No pressure at all. I just wanted to make sure before we move on to Nadine.
Just something very light from my end. I mean, we had an experience working on the Arab Climate Adaptation Lab, which we co-developed with our partners. And one of the key, I mean, it was supposed to be locally led adaptation projects, which are supposed to be locally based. Just one of the things that stood out was when we worked in a variety of geographic areas across Egypt. One of the things we found is our assumption that financial resources don't exist at the local level was wrong. And there were financial resources. But the question was, how do we come in as a foundation with our partners to work with the local community and utilize these resources appropriately? So as a thought as well, maybe don't make the assumptions, maybe take one step at a time. You'll find a starting spot, and a step at a time, you'll find unique areas where there are gaps already.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you to the four of you, the four M's, for bringing your power and your experiences to this session. Nadine, I wanted to just bring you in again to maybe shed a little bit of insights into the biggest, bestest things that you found from the process of putting together the implementation guide and the logic framework, and maybe point to some of the really what you think is key that you want the audience to walk away of from, I mean, a year of process. So it's hard to definitely boil it down. But I'm conscious of time and we want to give the audience ability to ask questions and for our speakers to answer. So over to you to share a little bit on the process.
Thank you so much. I was going to delve in a little bit into the actual logic model, but it is explained there. But I just want to point out that the dimensions of the logic model have both internal and external, how we think in whether we're talking about institutional development or systems thinking. This is about how we frame climate from my perspective, and this is how I kind of thought through this. And then external is how we communicate, but also how we build community. And that's one of the things that I want to kind of end with, is it's very important. And this was a key learning from putting together this implementation guide, is that there was an amazing several resources that we built on. The global one, we looked at we also pushed and had people reflect on the Canadian guide, and then each pillar had several working group members participate, and I really got a lot of details from them. So the idea that this was a year-long process for us to get here, it was iterative, and it was really based on local expertise and how several organizations would input, and so we would have a form, people would submit the form, and then I would develop that. There was no input, almost zero input from outside of the institutional knowledge from the working groups. And then we would spend an hour discussing it, sometimes getting down to a word where there was contention around it, and we would find a way to build. This was also, even in the development of this, we actually ran into a process. We were peer-to-peer learning. And that's where I really want to stop, because I think the thing that kind of jumps out at me most is
learning how to localize climate action in this is about learning from each other. And you have here several organizations in that process. I think we don't all know everything. There are organizations that know a lot more, and there are organizations that are leading that are also learning. But reaching out, creating that community around whether we're talking about foundations and philanthropies or local communities, learning how to do this. I think that that's the basis of community resilience. And honestly, I think that this is one of the best things walking away from the implementation guide, from developing the implementation guide, is that there's a lot of resilience both in the foundation space and then on the local community space. And I think that that's a really great place for AFF to move forward with this. And I do look forward to the coming years, and I hope that working group really does grow, because I think it's a wonderful space to have these kind of conversations, put forward challenges and pain points, and find a collective back.
I think we're getting a little bit of network trouble with Nadine, but she's making a great call to action for more foundations and organizations in the region to join this piece of work, and for the work to continue. And as we said, the launch of the implementation guide is not the end of a process, but it is really the beginning of a lot of work that will come down and transformation for philanthropy in the region. Thank you, Nadine, Mais, Maram, Miriam, Mohammed. I think we're going to do questions now. We have about 15 minutes on the clock. Waleed, I think you're going to help manage the question and answer period. Or Naila, but that's the end of the panel portion.
Thank you so much, Erica. Thank you so much to the panelists. And really just, listening to all of you talk about your commitment to this commitment just highlights for me, first of all, how interesting it is that across, each one of you and your organizations, you're at different parts and at different aspects of the journey, but still each of you have found some kind of nugget of value to be able to, number one, take to your organization, and number two, bring to the working group. And I just think it's such a testament to sort of how powerful the work of this working group has been. So I really just want to say, really, congratulations to every single member of the working group and every contributor to the working group. And then also to Waleed for just steering this so diligently over the last 2.5 years. Because really, when we first started out, we just weren't sure that we were going to be able to garner enough momentum. And I feel like we really should collectively be so proud of what this working group has been able to accomplish. So we have a couple of questions here that I think are really, really poignant and very just very apropos of this conversation. And I'd love to give each of you a chance to answer at least one of these. So the very first one, which I love, is from an anonymous attendee, but is basically asking about what advice each of you could give to someone working within a foundation or organization where they might be meeting some resistance to joining this commitment, and how they can maybe position this to convince their colleagues and leadership. And I think that's important because that's something we were feeling at the very beginning of our journey in terms of trying to get our members also to be convinced that this was a worthwhile endeavor to embark on. So I'm going to ask Mais, maybe if you can jump in, and then after Mais, if Maram also could talk a little bit about that, because the King Hussein Foundation was one of the very first organizations that signed on to this and wanted to, to be a part of it. Not sure how. I remember very well Hannah Shaheen, executive director of the King Hussein Foundation, being like, look, I'm not really sure how we're going to fit this in, but we're committed and we're going to do it. And then here we are, today, 2.5 years later. So Mais, if you could go first, and then Maram after that, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe we had, a different side of the problem. We had the leadership commitment to this, but we weren't sure how we would get staff onboarded. And I believe I already explained a little bit how we wanted to ensure that we created the space so everyone learns, everyone co-owns the process by being part of the developing the cross-cutting strategy, understanding what it means exactly, just breaking it down piece by piece, and putting aside, okay, the commitment is important, but what does it actually mean on the operational level, on a day-to-day basis? what it means in terms of, funding the different projects, reporting side, etc. So it's just breaking it down, and that it doesn't necessarily mean this is a humongous added workload on the different employees. So this was also important. It was also important to ensure internally that we will be providing the resources, but also really important was that it's not just time that they're putting there. We also made sure that they're being evaluated as staff against that, as part of, we have a so-called strategic enablement, indicator as part of staff's performance evaluation tools. So we wanted to, as part of the encouragement, this has 20% of the overall staff evaluation. So by being part of this is commitment that you're giving, that you're being evaluated against, and we put the governance structure in place to ensure that their direct supervisors are allowing this, that the sector directors will also be asked to report to us back how they've been enabling the different members to give the time needed to work on this. So that's one side of the story. Maybe with respect to her part, I mean, that's just one piece of recommendation from my end. Just start. I mean, if they don't want to sign the commitment, just have, different staff members work around, study the guide, look at it, start bit by bit on implementing some of the guidelines, even if it's not framed under as such, and then just, showcase, make a case that this is not, too much of a commitment, that you're already doing a lot of the work, just, flip it, and then just bring it back to their attention that, what, I've looked at the guide, we're already doing 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6 out of this. It is a piece of cake to just join the commitment, so we can also become part of a regional and a global, effort or a network around this.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mais. Maram.
Shall I go?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I understand, but I don't know who's the one who put this question and what scope or the work or the mission of his or her organization. But I understand this because different people have different backgrounds and have different perspectives into the environmental issues. So many people, when they hear, for example, climate, they think it's only environmental issue and it's not
Right.
linked or related to any other issues or into their core work. So I think they should start by explaining the impacts of climate change on the sectors that they work in, and they can show that the commitments to the AFF or commitments to climate change is not doing more, but it's reframing how you do things and to consider environmental sustainability. And it would be good to link climate commitments to the organization's existing priorities and to show how it will strengthen the organization capacity to get, for example, more projects to ensure the sustainability of the organization risk management and to align with different donors and funding agencies. And for example, if they do, for example, reduction in their carbon footprint, that this will result in reduction in their cost of their activities, cost of their operations. So it's climate, but it also has other benefits to other operational and strategic issues and pillars of the organization itself.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I think it's very key, the point that Mais you were making, and also Maram, what you're saying is that really, it can be an overwhelming proposition, especially if it's not already an embedded kind of key pillar within an organization. And so breaking it up into pieces that are digestible and also kind of highlighting how it's already embedded in some of the programming is a way to, to demystify the overwhelm of dealing with this. So the next question I want to ask, I'll direct it to Miriam, maybe from Mercy Corps' perspective. from Shala, where she asks, conflict and climate change are increasingly reinforcing each other within the region through infrastructure destruction, resource scarcity, and forced displacement. And how does the commitment encourage philanthropic actors to work across the climate conflict development nexus rather than in silos? And the silos question is, evergreen anyway in our sector across many different other kind of programs. So I'm just curious if you could answer that from the perspective of Mercy Corps and the work that you guys have been doing.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And it's a great question, especially since Mercy Corps works directly across this nexus. And I think the commitment recognizes that climate resilience, peace, and development rise or fall together. And I'd say one of the strengths of this commitment, especially this implementation guide, is that it's moving actors away from that siloed thinking. It doesn't treat climate, conflict, and development as separate agendas, but as deeply interconnected drivers of risk and resilience in the region. And I think there are a couple of practical ways that the commitment is encouraging philanthropies to work across this nexus. The first is through that integration and embedding climate risk and resilience across various development, humanitarian, and peace-building portfolios, rather than just funding climate as a standalone theme. Like I said, we've integrated climate as a cross-cutting issue. And that's particularly important in contexts that are affected by conflict, displacement, and infrastructure damage. I think it also emphasizes systems thinking. We're looking for institutions to kind of look beyond individual projects and then just consider how climate stress is interacting with resource scarcity, governance, livelihoods, and social cohesion, which are very much often at the heart of conflict dynamics. And then I think finally, it really does reinforce the importance of locally grounded and community-driven approaches. And communities are living at the intersection of climate and conflict, and they understand these linkages intuitively. And supporting their leadership and their agency is one of the most effective ways to design responses to address climate, conflict, and development together. So, in a way, the commitment and the guide we're not asking organizations to do more, kind of similar to the first question that was asked. We're just asking them to work differently. And I think that framework that helps philanthropic actors align their strategies and break down some of those internal silos and respond more coherently to the realities communities are facing on the ground is at the crux of this.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we have about 3 minutes left, and there's 3 more questions, but I do want to ask one particular question, and I'm going to ask Mohammed first, if you don't mind giving a response to this, and then Mais, if you can go after Mohammed. And it's the question from Dina Zaid. So Dina, first of all, says, this has been a brilliant panel. Thank you, Dina. And congratulations to all of you for this crucial milestone. She says, I have not heard very much about how you collectively and individually may choose to take these principles up as an advocacy tool with national and regional governments. And what is the role of this strategy and implementation vision as a possible governance tool? So Mohammed, if you have some kind of insight into how this can be integrated into the governance model of organizations and then can be used, to advocate for policy changes, et cetera.
Definitely. So I think this is actually quite an interesting, thought-provoking question, because one of the things that we're not the only sort of space trying to mobilize funds. We're not, and also the nonprofit sector is not the only sector that is also affected. The government is too, especially in the region. And I personally know and quite aware in the context, for instance, in Egypt and Jordan, where the governments are starting to look at alternative models to continue funding or financing some of their development work, obviously, albeit not all relating to climate. So where it can uniquely fit, in my opinion, is it can support, first of all, as a tool, as a guide for the commitment itself. It can support in bridging discussions with certain entities in government, for sure, and it can provide a sort of induction for specific government entities. In every country we have in the region, there's usually an entity, an agency, or an authority relating for or focused on international cooperation and development. This is the stakeholders the stakeholder we should go to and try to induct them into this vision. And possibly through these partnerships, new actors might join in, right? So you can actually get more support, more commitments coming in because of these partnerships. Now, the question on individual and collective, I believe this would happen much better at a collective level, but I don't think we're at that stage yet. I think this is what we are building towards. I think this is one of the steps we've taken to reach that collective action. This is more now on the individual level, more or less.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. That's great. Mais.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, actually. So the way we've been approaching it at the foundation was, through different tiers. At the end of the day, we are a grant-making foundation within the development sector inside of Egypt, and we are domestic philanthropy. So it was important, like as a grant-making foundation, we are also influencing others. So that's part of the collective, because through our grant-making, through our changing the language within our call for proposals that we're going to be open, through embedding, specific mandate indicators that must exist in the different, proposals that we're going to be receiving around climate change. So that's part of, influencing the collective thinking as well, by ensuring that as part of our commitments, through our funding, we want to ensure that this is happening. That's one side of the story. The second part was, the NGO capacity building program that we're working on, and embedding climate change as one of the modules, to ensuring also that the different NGOs also have the capacities that they need to be also, learn about this and know how to implement it. And then third is our whole strategy, as I mentioned, is, we only fund evidence-based programming. And funding evidence-based programming means that we fund the actual interventions, the on-the-ground activities, and on the side, we also fund impact evaluations using rigorous evidence tools such as, randomized controlled trials with partners such as JPAL or the Egypt Impact Lab. And that's part of the collective advocacy, strategy that we adopt at the foundation. So we're taking the risk, putting some funding in projects we're not sure, and those would embed, climate resilient and, climate adaptive interventions. We would measure the impact on those vulnerable communities, and we would make the case at national level, like why it is important also from the different governments to embed, some of the learnings from those, impact evaluations and the research that was conducted alongside. So far, we've invested $5 million in different impact evaluations. So that's how important it is for us. And that's, our strategy that we're using to also influencing national level policymaking.
Great. Thank you so much. So we're 2 minutes over time. There's never enough time. So I want to make sure that we wrap this up and say thank you so much to everyone for joining. Number one, for staying with us. We had a very, very high attendance this time. That's encouraging. And thank you so much to our panelists and our speakers. I really appreciate you taking the time to share all of this wisdom with us, and also really just to being such dedicated partners on this initiative, because it's surprisingly one of the most, in addition to our humanitarian relief and recovery task force, which is another working group that we've had for almost the same amount of time as the climate group, really the two kind of program pillars that surprisingly have brought us the most momentum and the most engagement with our members, which I would not have guessed. And I just really kind of love this for us. So thank you all so much. And we didn't get a chance to get to all of the questions, but I think we tried to answer as many as possible. In the chat, we had a bunch of links and our email addresses. You can reach out to us. You can reach out to Alid on anything that has to do with the climate commitment. And we hope to be able to bring more and more to you guys on, progress, more and more on the progress of each of the individual signatories and what they've been able to accomplish. And we'll make sure to share all of this with everyone. And thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Bye. And Erica, thank you, Erica. Thank you, Erica. And thank you, Wings. Always, of course.
Bye. Thank you, Nadia.
Bye.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Thank you.